Hi, Al. How you doing today? Today, I want to talk about how do we help students to make sense of a problem. We've talked about a few different ways that can work, but really what I want to talk about is some things maybe we want to try to avoid, some things we want to think about. Okay, maybe am I kind of trying to help, but it's actually making things a little bit more confusing for students, even though I'm trying to help. So I want to talk specifically about like a word problem. We talk about using the three reads to make sense of a problem, and sometimes teachers annotate that problem to help students to understand it more, or at least that's why they think they're annotating. And I want to think about, okay, what are things that might be unintended consequences about that? So I'm going to talk about a problem that we have today and thinking about Henry is walking to the beach and picking up shells. He already picked up 7 shells. He wants to pick up a total of 15 shells. How many more does he need to pick up? So that's a problem that we have, and I would always recommend showing that problem up on a screen or up on a chart paper. I know there's some other research that says it should be auditorily done, but I'm a big fan of having students kind of see that so that it gives, again, an opportunity for students to read it and make sense of it themselves. But some teachers, as we go into here, have students immediately underline all the important numbers and all the important words and the keywords and underline and those things. And as we look at this, when we do that, that can actually present a problem and an unintended problem. If we get students to immediately underline numbers and underline keywords, what can end up happening is students start to not actually read the problem at all when they're presented it in the future. They begin to just look at word problems and just immediately underline numbers and immediately underline keywords, and it's sort of like a word search. They're not actually making sense of the problem at all. Instead, they're actually doing the opposite. They're not making sense of the problem. They see a word problem and they're just looking at the numbers. And if I underline 7 and underline 15 and underline more, I just immediately think, oh, cool, it's an addition problem because it's 7 and 15 and more. The teacher told me to underline things. That's what I did. 7, 15, and more. I add them together. I get 22. That's my answer, Mister. I'm done. And as I'm thinking about that, that tends to happen very often. What we tried to do is we tried to help the students to slow down, to read it, to look at the numbers, to identify the numbers. Unintentionally, what we did is we had them do a word search. We had them look at that words in there and not actually make sense of them at all. And then sometimes we even take it a step further and say, okay, let's underline those words. Let's go ahead and circle the question. Let's go ahead and put squares around all the important names and all the important things we're doing. And then what happens is honestly a big jumble of confusion. And if a student was looking away for a half a minute and then looked up at the screen, what they see is a jumble of confusion and it didn't help to make any sense. The teacher was doing all of the cognitive lift. The teacher was helping students to say, hey, underline this, circle this, do this, and trying to make a procedural routine of understanding a word problem, when in essence, it might be more valuable to go back to the raw problem as it's written and really think about, okay, what is it we're trying to represent? What's the problem about? As we look at this, we're beginning to think, hey, this problem's about going for a walk on the beach. How many of you have ever gone for a walk on the beach? I can picture going for a walk on the beach. I can picture picking things up from the beach. I can picture my hands being full, or maybe a bucket being full of something. I can picture that. I can picture the movie in my mind. Once I can picture that, once I can have students explain to me, oh, you've been to the beach before. That's cool. Oh, you haven't been to the beach before. Oh, okay, let's talk about that. Now the students are beginning to make sense of the actual real world problem. So if we're thinking of making sense of the real world problem, I can then say, okay, now what are we trying to find out? And we're trying to find out how many more does he need to pick up. Maybe I'll use hand gestures as saying, hey, he has this amount. He's looking for this amount. He's looking for the how much more he needs altogether because he's looking for a total amount of 15. And instead of just underlining things and instead of circling things and making it a rote procedure, we're beginning to actually make sense of the problems we're doing here. So if you're into having students making more sense, and if you often look at it and say, hey, we just did a three read, we just had students go through here and annotate, and there's still student confusion, I would have you think about, are you having students create word searches, or are you having them think about what is the meaning of this word problem? And thinking about, let's picture that movie in our head. Let's picture that situational idea. Let's picture using hand gestures. Maybe I'm thinking about different ways I can do it. I still don't want to tell them how to solve it, but I want to make sure they all understand what it is they're trying to solve before I release them to work on that productive struggle. So hopefully that works for you. Hopefully some of these visuals are helpful for you to figure out what are some next steps you might take. As always, please feel free to leave in the comments things that have worked for you or questions you might have, or maybe even some areas of focus you want to look on in the future. All right, Al. Have a great day.